The session is fun with WSL. I have to start out with an apology because, hey, how you doing? I have to start with an apology because I thought I could do a live demo, but I'm not able to do that. So my laptop is sitting on the floor over there. I have to do pre-recorded. So I didn't know that, and I have everything live ready to go, but I have to use theirs. So I'm going to have to talk to you through a deck. But hopefully, I can interject some stuff. So this is me. My name is Mike Nelson. I'm actually a principal technologist with Cohesity, and I have been doing this for a long time. I really got into the WSL a couple of years ago, working between Linux and Windows. How many folks actually use WSL? Anybody use WSL? Awesome. Okay. How many folks even know what WSL means? Who don't know what WSL means? Don't be shy. All right, it's a Windows Subsystem for Linux. It's actually a bridge between Windows and Linux. If you'd like any of my presentations, you can screen cap this right here if you'd like. All of my presentations go back to 2005. So if you have any interest in them, you can get them from there. In 3, 2, 1, okay. So the Windows Subsystem for Linux, there are two variants of it. There is a stable and a preview. There is a version 1 and a version 2, if you're not aware of that. They are both active builds right now. You use version 1 mainly if you're doing a lot of file stuff. So if you're going between a Windows file system and a Linux file system, you want to stay on what's called V1 or version 1. If you're not doing a lot of file transfer between the two OSs, then by all means, go to version 2. Use the latest and greatest. Okay? That's where it come in. V2 is required for the compatibility optimizations. And it does run on Windows Client and also runs on Windows Server. Okay? So you can run on either one. Now, why would you want to run it on server? Anybody? There's really not a good reason unless you use server as your administrative desktop, in my opinion. If anybody can give me a really good reason why you'd run it on server, I'd love to hear it. Because otherwise, you're really not. And the best thing about it is it's open source. Everything WSL is open source, including the kernel, which has never been open source by Microsoft before. The story. Friends. Let's be friends. I don't know if you've ever heard of the story between Linux and Microsoft, but they never liked each other. It goes back to Steve Ballmer, where he said, Linux is a cancer. He actually called it a cancer. Said, it attaches itself to everything it touches. And the worst part about it was Microsoft PR followed up right after he said that on the show, on a worldwide stage. They followed up with this statement: free software is a devil's work. I mean, this came from a company now who is like embraced open source, everything is cool about open source. I can't tell you, Steve Ballmer couldn't have been more wrong, really. And who knows who this is? Yeah? He's one of the coolest guys, man. He really is. We make peace with our enemies and not our friends. That's you couldn't say it any better, especially when you're talking about between these two, Microsoft and Linux. All right, so why WSL? Folks that know WSL, why do you use it? Just to play around with? Why do you use it?
I was trying to use it for more Git stuff originally.
For more Git stuff? That's a great example, actually.
Instead of installing Bash.
Yeah, with Bash, right? Anybody who wants to use a Bash shell, the best way to do it is to use WSL. Why would you use a VM? Some folks will say, I want to use a VM. I mean, I spin up a Linux VM and I can just, do the same thing. Well, how long does it take you to spin up a Linux VM? To get that image the way you want? It takes a while, right? You have to uninstall packages, update packages, do all that other kind of stuff. With WSL, you can have an image actually loaded within seconds. And you can have a Linux kernel running right there. And you can have different distributions as well. So if you like Ubuntu, if you like Debian, if you like, Alma Linux, if you like XYZ Linux, if you like ABC Linux, whatever distributions you like, you can have it up and running in seconds. Okay, so that is really kind of the core part of why you would use WSL. Developers love it because they do cross-platform. They can actually develop in Linux and Windows at the same time. And they can work, you know, hey, I'm in a Linux window here, I'm in a Windows here, I can go across, I can copy files between them. Their interoperability, you can actually bring it up in Explorer and you have a little Linux icon, you double click it, you're inside the Linux file system. It's that simple. So it's completely cross-platform. And that interoperability is there. Now, is it exact? No, because they're two different animals. I mean, Linux permissions are different. You know, I'll get into that in a second. You know, there are file pathings, case sensitivity. Those are all things that are different, but they can be overcome with, you know, little changes and things you can make. Now, of course, I had all this in a live demo, but I can't show you. So the different versions, I want to point this out. This is really kind of important. So in version 1, you had a translation layer. All right? What does that mean? When you have a translation layer, even in VMware speak, what does a translation layer mean? It means overhead. Okay? It means something's got to translate between something else, and it causes overhead. Okay? So WSL does that. Now, it's really efficient with file operations because it has a direct filter file driver it works with. Okay? So it goes right from the kernel to the translation layer to the distro. Where here in version 2, it actually talks user mode. Now in Linux, there's two different kinds of modes. There's user mode and kernel mode. In Windows, they've adopted the same thing, user mode and kernel mode. User mode is where everything happens with what you do. All right, so that is kind of key. Taking the virtual machine platform, which is not Hyper-V. Okay, so anybody says, is that Hyper-V? No, it is not. It is a thin layer, okay? That is what they call HPC, okay? It is not Hyper-V. That's that lightweight utility VM right there. And all it does is it has all this stuff talking to each other, which makes it much more efficient. So the components, I'm not going to go through all these in the WSL. These are all the different components that are involved in it. When you look at the distributions, these are all the different distributions that you could have that are available. Okay, this is not a complete list. Okay, but one thing I did want to point out here is the custom. You can create your own distributions. It doesn't matter. You can, you know, roll your own. You can create whatever you'd like, and you can make it a golden image if you have a specific distribution you need for your development or something like that for testing. You can create your own and distribute it out and have them loaded directly into the WSL. It doesn't have to be approved by Microsoft. It doesn't have to be, you know, conform to anything. It just has to be a Linux distribution. Microsoft actually provides a tool out on the GitHub repo site that allows you to create those types of custom distributions. Installation, won't go through all these either, but this is basically how you install it. If you've never installed it before, whole bunch of different ways. When you go through distributions, okay, so going through and just installing WSL, that's the first part. Just so you know, not a big deal with Windows 11 and the future builds of Server 2022 and Server whatever beyond. It'll all be included. Distributions are a different story. All depends on how the distribution is packaged. WSL is a main component, does all kinds of stuff. The command line, you can run everything command line that you can do if you were doing it in the UI and more. So if you ever have to execute something for a developer, help desk, something like that, you can just run WSL.exe with any one of these command lines, import, export, create a, if you export an actual distribution, you can export it to a VHDX file, which is, for those VMware folks that don't know, it is a Hyper-V disk image, and you can mount that, and you can just treat it like any other disk. You can mount it on any operating system you like. And I'm being told to speed up. Interoperability, files and drives. Again, everything that goes into it between the two, same with apps and processes. Interoperability you can disable. Sometimes you don't want the two to talk to each other, okay? So you might want to disable it. And then we get into advanced configuration. There's a couple different files you can do to change, like RAM. You want to start with 4 gig? No, I want to go to 8 gig. You can change that. So your Linux distributions have more RAM, more networking, even sound, things like that. And there is a vulnerability. This is the last thing I'm going to show you. Lotus Labs discovered a vulnerability. I want to make you aware of this, full disclosure. But this has been out for 9 years. WSL has been a product for 9 years. They just discovered this in 2021. So, hey, you know, it's Linux, it's shell. It happens. I would say shell happens. Yeah, you can say that. And then we finally have the graphics portion. Anybody who uses Linux graphics, you can do it now in WSL. So you have full X Windows capability inside of WSL or WSLG as they call it. And that's where I was going to demo everything, but I've got to go. So here's a little kid tidbit slide that you can download as well. And thank you very much. You can reach me here. That was a fast 12 minutes.